My name's Rob, and this is a place for you to share and gain insight on how to succeed and better serve more families in this rapidly changing marketplace. This is FDTV.
Hello, and welcome to this now our fourth episode of FDTV. Thanks for clicking the play button. You know, one of the most common themes that we try to tackle at Funeral Directors Life, and one of the reasons that we've created this program, is change. We're asked every day, how do we in funeral service continue to find new ways to meet the challenges that come with change so that we can help you continue to grow your businesses and better serve your families? Well, on today's program, Chris and I visited with a pastor whose congregation faced similar challenges not too long ago. And he shares with us some things that his church did to turn things around and grow membership from just 200 people to now well over 5,000 members. And while some industry naysayers might challenge that there's a trend for families to have less interest in the things that traditional church service and traditional funeral services have in common, like chapels and pews and altars, we thought it might be interesting to explore what success might look like for an organization that's visionary enough to re-examine its methodology. You might be thinking, how does this relate to us in funeral service? Especially when all we seem to hear these days is that families are less and less interested in even having any religious component at all as part of their service. Well, let's watch and find out.
You know, 1 Corinthians 9 says we become all things to all people so that by all possible means we might win some. So whether people agree with us or not, we have an overarching mission, and that mission is to help people come into relationship with God through Jesus Christ. But we can become all things, which means we have flexibility on how we do that.
Right.
We have a mission. The mission is unchanging. The method by which we accomplish it has to change so that we can accomplish the mission. And churches have been stuck for a long time. They tend to stick. They go 2 or 3 generations and they stick, and then there's a movement, then they stick for 2 or 3 generations. The problem is our culture is just not allowing the stick any longer. It's changing at such a rapid pace. And I would say traditional entities like education, churches, and funeral homes that fall in that category are having trouble keeping up.
What do you think is stirring up that change?
What do I think stirring up the change? Honestly, I think change is coming in our society in large part because of technology, technological change. So there's actually, there's some studies that show that, the amount of change between AD 1, so close to the birth of Jesus to 82,000, that amount of change, all that happened in that time period, including the Industrial Revolution and all that, more change has occurred in our world since 2000 to 2019 than has occurred in the previous 2,000 years. That the pace of change, it used to be a steady incline, and now what you're seeing is a J curve. We're just changing with the amount of data that's being produced is doubling and tripling every year now. I mean, again, the amount of data between AD 1 and AD 2000 was now with that same amount of data and information that was created was now created in 2018 alone. 1 year equaled 2,000 years of information. So there's so much information, so much stuff. Technology is driving a lot of that, so people are used to change. And now, I'm going to also say that people are anxious. There's a lot of anxiety in our culture, and they're anxious because of all the change. Mm-hmm. There's not a rootedness, and so there's this thing in which we almost want to get away from tradition, and yet the very thing tradition brought to us, the rootedness, the security, we're losing that. And so anxiety levels, lack of peace levels, all that are very much on the rise in our very prosperous culture. It's an intriguing enigma we're in.
That causes some panic for funeral homeowners because
yeah.
they sense that too, and they're just like, they think it's all going to just go off the rails, and there doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of hope. But I think that, what are your thoughts on it resetting itself?
I don't know that, I still think there's no end to the amount of change that's going to occur. I don't think things are going to go off the rails. Churches feel the same way. Churches were traditional organizations. The way churches had done what they've done has been, for many churches, generations. And now that's really not working anymore. That's not accomplishing things, and it's forcing churches to look at how we do what we do. Not necessarily what we do, the message. We would say the message that we bring is the same message. How we bring the message, the methodologies that we have, the methods by which that we use, those have to change to accomplish our mission. And our mission is to help people know God through Jesus Christ. That's what we would say. But the way we did that in the church I grew up in, it won't work today. It's not accomplishing that. And so we had to make adjustments to say we have a mission. The mission is what matters. And if that mission is what matters, then let's be willing to adjust anything. So the way we'd say it around our church is we'll do anything except sin to help people know Jesus Christ. Whatever it takes, whatever change we have to make, whatever we have to do, as much as we know how, we will try to do that to help people have that best opportunity. I think churches that are succeeding have a high value for community and work very hard for community. Even when people come in, people want to, in our churches, they don't want to be known, they want to be autonomous, but eventually they want the opportunity to move into a place of community. And that's what we have to provide. And I'm assuming in the funeral business they want a sense of being cared for. Probably we'd use the term service, but I think it's beyond service. There's a genuine empathy. A funeral director is invited in to the most intimate part of a person's life.
Right.
I mean, when you're in that part, because I've joined in with hundreds of those situations, and we're invited into the most vulnerable place, the rawest place in people's life. And they want to know that somebody really genuinely cares for them in that moment. And when we can do that, everything else begins to fall into place.
That's exactly right. I mean, the funeral homes and the funeral directors that I talk to, they're the ones that do it for that reason.
But what I'm seeing, though, Rob, in funeral homes, and as I talk to funeral directors and funeral homeowners, when families come in to make an arrangement for a loved one, they're coming in with a different mindset.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a societal change or shift that the funeral homes are seeing, and it's one that, when I meet with them, it's kind of beats them down because these are caregivers. I mean, our funeral directors are caregivers, as you said, and they look to and desire to do that.
Yeah.
But when families come in and it appears to be a lack of care, and a selfishness,
right,
and then more of a concern of money than a concern of taking care of themselves and taking care of their loved one. I mean, how do you see that playing out?
I would say that I would say that people are definitely changing in their approach to certain traditional organizations. It's true in the church as well. It used to be, probably a generation or 2 generations ago, it was just a given, pretty much, especially in the South of the United States, but I'd say throughout, that most people would identify with some sort of Christian group, some sort of church. That sense of identification has lessened. Now, that, they would identify doesn't mean they participated. Or they might be somebody who, once a year was around, but then they would follow through probably with end-of-life stuff. They would follow through with the traditions of that which they identified with. Now you're seeing the rise of those who are unaffiliated. Often they're called nuns, not like Catholic nuns, but N-O-N-E-S, no religion. And they have no affiliation, and so therefore they're not binding themselves to that tradition. I think, so I do think there is a sense, I'm guessing, I don't know this, I think there was probably a season of days gone by that the way we did a funeral for a loved one was an act of honor.
Right.
How we did it was an honorable thing. I don't think people feel that the funeral and the way you do it now is connected to the honor that you give to a loved one. It doesn't demonstrate the amount of love they have. And so the funeral is, we tell them, we would tell them the funeral isn't for the loved one's gone.
Right.
The loved one is reaping his reward, her reward in heaven. We're going to say the funeral's for you. Well, I think they're starting to believe that.
Yeah.
And they're starting to say it is for us. So, it's not unusual for us that somebody will pass away and they want to do the funeral in 2.5 weeks.
Right.
They want to push it, whereas
Right.
before it was going to be somebody died in 2 days, we're having a funeral.
Right, exactly.
That's what was going to occur, maybe 3
Right.
if we could push to a weekend. Now we're having people pushing off 2, 3, 4 weeks just to see if they can get loved ones in, because it's a community aspect.
Right.
If we could do that, we have a lot of times now where for us, all of our memorial services that we have are different. There's nothing common.
Yeah.
We take on a service posture and say we want to help you as a family grieve. What can we do to help you? And that's going to be anything from having the funeral streamed online to include people to various kinds of things that they want to do. And we've just learned over time various things people want. We throw those ideas out to them. We just say, we're here to serve you.
Yeah.
How can we as a church serve you in this time? And so if you came to 3 funerals at our church, they would look utterly, absolutely different.
Right.
I mean, we had one the other day where they wanted our worship team and they wanted to be like our church. And we had one the next week, and though the people came to our church, they wanted a different style of music than our church has, and so they brought in like bluegrass gospel. And we have never had bluegrass gospel in our church. It was beautiful, and it was awesome, and they did that, and the way the service was arranged and all that. And I'm finding that people, they don't feel bound to traditional things. They're trying to chart a path. And, the concern I have is, sadly, I see too many people just saying we're not going to do anything.
Right.
And I think that's unhealthy.
Right.
I don't think we as a culture, I'm giving you a lot of stuff, I don't think we as a culture know how to grieve right now. I think that is part of what we're losing, is we don't know how to grieve. We don't deal with the big pictures of life, which is what we're about, and really what funeral homes are about. You're dealing with the one inevitable of humanity. And right now in our culture, with all that's going on, the issue of death is not talked about a lot. It's not faced a lot. You probably find it in your business that people just don't even want to talk about it. It's like, we want to talk to you about your pre-need or your end of year, and they're going, I don't want to talk about that.
Right.
And I think that's on the increase as well.
There's so much that we can take away from this first segment of our interview with Chris and Pastor David. I promise you, there'll be more to come in future programs in the weeks ahead. But there are a few things that I'd like to review that I found helpful, even in my role as a marketing professional in funeral service. And the first thing we discussed that stood out to me was how important it is to be able to have a clear concept of your vision. For Pastor David, the mission is clear: to bring people to know God through Jesus Christ. And I would think that for many funeral homeowners and funeral directors, their mission is simply to care for and serve grieving families. But during times of the type of extreme change that we're now seeing in funeral service today, we're seeing a lot of negative reaction and panicked behavior. And that's why it's so crucial to maintain a proper focus on your mission, which is why we do what we do. But even more important to me was how we saw that it becomes necessary for us to re-examine our methodologies or how we go about serving our mission. And we ask ourselves difficult questions sometimes, like, am I adapting to the changing environment? Or is there more I could be doing to meet or even anticipate my customers' needs? Because the answers to those questions only come when we identify and eliminate things we do that do not serve the mission and begin focusing efforts on the things that do serve the mission. And for me, I guess the final takeaway, the most important thing I'm coming away from this program with is, are we asking ourselves every day, what can I do right now to assume more of a service posture, to create a better sense of community, to connect with and educate families on their terms, and help create experiences for them that honor the person that has died in a personal and meaningful way. I promise we'll have more from this interview in the coming weeks, but for now, I want to know what you've taken away from what we've covered on today's program. Please feel free to add a comment or send us an email, because as always, your feedback really is why we do what we do. Thanks for watching.